a minute. Andy Buchkovich is a longtime hater of the Democratic Party. He's a hardcore part of the problem fan, and he is a radical anarchist. So he's going to be talking in just a minute. I want to remind you all, though, fuck these lockdowns. Please do whatever you can, civil disobedience. Don't do anything illegal, just civil disobedience. This is bullshit, and these people are monsters. So, that being said, I love you all. Thank you guys for coming. And please give it up for your speaker, Andy Buchkovich. Oh, all the material at the back is free. Grab that on your way out. Here's Andy.
Hey, everybody. So I wish I was coming to you with a happier topic, but this is a story about the motherfuckers that are locking us down getting away with some shit. So we've all been hearing a lot the past 2 weeks about how important it is to accept the results of elections. You can hardly turn on the news without hearing some talking head repeating some version of how President Trump's refusal to concede and baseless legal challenges threaten the very fabric of our democracy. Twitter has gone so far as to put a warning on all of the president's tweets, kindly letting us know that his claims about the election have not been verified. The clear message from polite society is simple: shut up and accept the results of the election, because that's what's always been done. Our democracy hangs in the balance, we're told. But is that what's always been done? This presidential term has been a whirlwind of daily or even hourly news cycles, particularly this year. And it's easy to forget what happened merely a week ago. However, don't you all remember hearing a little something about how the Russians hacked our elections? Russia. For years, the story that President Donald Trump colluded with the Russian government to steal the 2016 election has dominated our national discourse. I thought for a long time about ways I could illustrate how much of this story has completely inundated the national conversation. A collage of news headlines, a montage of establishment politicians repeating the words Russian collusion. No, the best demonstration also shows just how much what happens in this country on a policy level is influenced by media narratives. Trump's hawkishness on Russia. Despite overtures of being willing to work with Russia at periodic conciliatory actions at summits like Helsinki, Dave DeCamp, writing for antiwar.com, details these foreign policy actions, none of which would happen without the public pressure from this Russian narrative. Since taking office, President Trump has supplied arms to Ukraine, a move that President Obama was hesitant to make for fear of provoking Putin. Trump has even sent U.S. troops to participate in war games with Ukrainian forces. Poland's defense minister just announced that Warsaw and Washington agreed on locations to increase U.S. troops' presence in the country. The two countries agreed to add 1,000 more U.S. troops to the 4,500 already in Poland. There has also been talk of building a permanent U.S. military base in the country, which the Polish offered to name Fort Trump. In March, President Trump officially recognized the Golan Heights as part of Israel. In return for the favor, Netanyahu named his settlement Trump Heights. The Golan Heights was seized by Israel from Syria in 1967. Recognizing it as Israeli territory is another provocation towards Russia, as Syria is one of Russia's major allies in the region. The Trump administration has been especially hostile to Russia's ally in South America, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Since opposition leader Juan Guaido declared himself president in January, the Trump administration has been throwing their undying support behind him. Trump recently announced sanctions against anybody doing business with the Venezuelan government, effectively enacting a blockade on the country. The list of things like this: sanctions, blockades, putting troops closer and closer to Russia, the list goes on. And all of it brought on by a political need to look tough on Russia due to the accusations of collusion. Trump was completely conciliatory during the campaign. All the time he said we should work with them, there's no reason we should be hostile to them. And he's pressured by these ghouls to do things that are not in anybody's best interest. But, I mean, maybe the hysteria about the story is for good reason though, right? I mean, after all, if the accusations are true, the executive branch of the federal government has been in control of the Russian government for the last 4 years. But what if the accusations were untrue? As cable news pundit and moderate libertarian podcaster Dave Smith puts it, this is the biggest political scandal in American history, whether it's true or not. Investigation. The Mueller report delivered the results of the best investigation our nation could muster into these allegations. Attorney General Bill Barr summarized the findings as such. The special counsel's investigation did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with Russia to influence the 2016 presidential campaign. How then did the story beleaguer the American public for so long? Through malfeasant coordination between the media, the intelligence agencies, and members of the Congressional Intelligence Committees. The biggest political scandal in American history. The roots of the Russiagate hoax stem from the allegations that Russia hacked the DNC server to obtain the material that would be released by WikiLeaks throughout the 2016 election cycle. Despite all the articles in the press to the contrary, this has never been proven. Media stories casting blame towards Russia began as soon as the DNC had announced it had been compromised. These were driven by a report by DNC-employed cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike that the source of the hack was Russian in origin. Eventually, the report was certified by intelligence agencies, with them confirming that Russian government actors were responsible for the hack, with the media widely reporting that 17 intelligence agencies confirm Russia hacked the DNC. This is an aside, but it's important to note that the 17 intelligence agencies thing is an example of the kind of thing you'll see over and over again when you start digging into the Russiagate thing. Despite the story being all you could hear about when it came out, it was eventually retracted by the New York Times, with them stating, the assessment was made by 4 intelligence agencies, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA. The assessment was not approved by all 17 organizations in the American intelligence community. Over and over again, there are these stories that serve as the basis for the whole narrative that just get repeated endlessly, and they're eventually retracted, and you never ever hear about the retraction. Anyway, the intelligence agencies confirmed that it was Russia that hacked the DNC servers. Their evidence, the same evidence as WMD's in Iraq. Trust us. That, and CrowdStrike knows what they're talking about. We know so. The problem is that CrowdStrike's analysis was bunk. CrowdStrike's report that Russia hacked the DNC server relies on methodology that analyzes the tools used in the hack and metadata around the hack. As CEO of cybersecurity firm Taya Global, Jeffrey Carr puts it, this methodology is fatally flawed. The way their methodology works is that they identify the digital footprint of tools used in hacks using a bunch of complicated technical mechanisms. That part's legitimate. The problem is that they then associate these tools with specific entities. Jeffrey Carr describes the problem. Unlike CrowdStrike, ESET, another cybersecurity firm, doesn't assign AP28/FancyBear/SedNet, these are the software hacking tools I was describing, to a Russian intelligence service or anyone else for a very simple reason. Once malware is deployed, it is no longer under the control of the hacker who deployed it or the developer who created it. It can be reverse engineered, copied, modified, shared, and redeployed again and again by anyone. In other words, malware deployed is malware enjoyed. In fact, the source code for X-Agent, which was used in the DNC, Bundestag, and TV5 Monda attacks, was obtained by ESET as part of their investigation. During their investigations, they were able to retrieve the complete X-Agent source code for the Linux operating system. What that means is that if you have the source code, you have the software. You can implement it on any platform, embed it where it shouldn't be, and use the hack. If ESET could do it, so can others. It is both foolish and baseless to confirm, as CrowdStrike does, that X-Agent is used solely by the Russian government when the source code is there for anyone to find and use at will. So, on a technical level, we can tell that CrowdStrike's analysis isn't provable. Ultimately, all that is irrelevant though, as the CEO of CrowdStrike said this in a congressional testimony released in 2020, and this is, we did not have concrete evidence that alleged Russian hackers actually took the emails from DNC servers. There's circumstantial evidence, but no evidence that they were actually the CEO of the company. There you have it, right from the horse's mouth. The key piece of evidence in the Russiagate narrative was never evidence at all. That never stopped the media from running with it or politicians like Adam Schiff from repeating it. It really inspires a lot of faith in our media that after they circulated this company's analysis so widely, they made sure the news that he recanted was just as well known by the American public. If not the Russians though, then who? It bears pointing out that it's unclear that the DNC was ever hacked at all. Hacked implies that some outside agency used some kind of malware to gain access to the DNC servers. It's equally likely, however, that the data was leaked by an inside source. In fact, several analysts have pointed out that the speed used to transfer the data with a local connection, and it just so happens that the speed was the speed of a USB drive. It's also worth pointing out that the emails released from the hack or leak showed significant coordination by the DNC against Bernie Sanders. I should further point out that the DNC staffer, Seth Rich, a Bernie Sanders supporter who had access to the network, was shot dead outside his home in an alleged robbery where nothing was stolen a few days before it was announced the DNC had a security breach. Finally, I will point out that in emails released by WikiLeaks, John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign chief, said that I'm definitely for making an example of a suspected leaker, whether or not we have any real basis for it. I'll let you all decide what you think about all that. At any rate, the seeds of a connection between Trump and Russia were now planted in the minds of the American public. That the media would report on an ultimately unverifiable story is appalling, yet unsurprising. But here's where the story gets shocking. That connection would be used to orchestrate what can only be described as a coup against the duly elected president of the United States, carried out by the intelligence agencies, the DNC, and a willing media. The coup started on August 15th, 2016, in a meeting in FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe's office, and leaked text messages to his lover and fellow agent Lisa Page. Attendee Peter Strzok said of the meeting, "I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office. There's no way he gets elected, but I'm afraid we can't take the risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event that you die before you're 40. An insurance policy against a democratically elected president. And they want to cry about the integrity of our elections right now, this year? Give me a break. The insurance policy clearly is that the FBI is going to do something to hobble or disable Trump on the impossible chance he should be elected as president, just in case the American people have the gall to do something that we at the FBI think that they shouldn't do. The way that they went about this was using a document called the Steele dossier. Any of you remember hearing about how Trump got urinated on by hookers in a Russian hotel that Obama had stayed in? That's the Steele dossier. It was a piece of opposition research on Trump written by ex-British intelligence agent Christopher Steele on behalf of Oppo research agency Fusion GPS. It contained many explosive claims, like the P-tape, and claims of Trump owing lots of money to Russian oligarchs. In April 2016, Clinton campaign attorney of record Mark Elias hired Fusion GPS to produce this dossier on behalf of the campaign. In August, right around the meeting in McCabe's office, despite knowing its origins as Oppo research, the FBI began to investigate the Steele dossier as part of its Operation Crossfire Hurricane, knowingly investigating something they knew was bullshit. This was an effort to investigate the Trump's campaign's ties to Russia. As part of this, the FBI attempted to get what is called a FISA warrant. A FISA warrant is a secret warrant obtained through the United States Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. The U.S. federal court established and authorized under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, to oversee requests for surveillance warrants against foreign spies, including the United States, by federal enforcement and intelligence agencies. It's already shocking that one administration's FBI would wiretap the incoming administration when we're being lectured over and over again about like peacefully transitioning. But what makes this an intentional coup is that to get this warrant, despite knowing that it was likely untrue Oppo research, they used the Steele dossier as evidence to obtain the wiretap on Carter Page, a Trump campaign official. And not only did they wiretap, they lied to do it. They knowingly lied to the court to spy on the rival party's presidential campaign. You guys remember Watergate? And these are the people that are lecturing us now about the peaceful transition of power. This would not be the last appearance of the Steele dossier. Not only was it used as a bogus document to get a FISA warrant, it was used to threaten Trump. On January 6, 2017, James Comey and other intelligence officers presented the dossier to Trump, telling him about a piece of Steele's reporting that indicated Russia had files of derogatory information on both Clinton and the president-elect. Comey said that before the meeting, he had been told to be very careful, choose your words carefully, and then get out of there. He's the head of the FBI. This is the man who interrogates the head of organized crime in this country. And against Donald Trump, who many people on Twitter have described as the gayest straight man on earth, is intimidating you. Come on. It's the most ridiculous thing. But Where was I? About telling Trump about a dossier, about telling Trump about a dossier he knew at the time to be bullshit. Comey left the meeting and began taking notes in his car outside Trump Tower, a highly unusual practice. Even more unusual was how these notes, which would be classified material, were immediately obtained by the press, who began reporting about how Trump was briefed on convincing evidence of Russia collusion that he was ignoring because he's a Russian agent. Can you imagine, like, the FBI learned something from the people that it tries to prosecute? Because can you imagine a more mafioso tactic? Nice incoming administration you have there. Be a real shame if disinformation about it was published in the New York Times. Remember, Trump is about to allegedly be these people's boss, and this is how they're acting. This is, once again, a total assault on democratic norms. Trump has said some mean things on Twitter, but this is what the actual, mechanisms of democracy depend on, is that, the levers and the people who don't get elected and who do what they're told for a living continue to do so. Otherwise, we are ruled. We're not represented, we are ruled. After Comey's notes went public, it was an excuse for the FBI to put the dossier in the hands of John McCain, may he burn in hell's office, who leaked it to BuzzFeed, who published it on January 10th, 2017. They published it because CNN had reported that Comey had briefed Trump on the dossier a few days earlier. This made it a matter of public interest. You see the tactic here? Leak the dossier to the press, then brief the president both to intimidate him and give the press an excuse to publish it. Once the dossier was in the public eye, it was an excuse to launch a full investigation. As you can see, the whole investigation was manufactured BS, all ultimately sourced to bogus Democrat opposition research. An attempted coup. Trump felt the same way, later saying that he felt Comey was trying to blackmail him, obviously. No matter, though, the investigation was underway. After months of refusing to confirm whether or not the president was under investigation, Trump fired Comey. While there were many stated reasons, Trump has mentioned this shakedown so often that it's hard not to think that this was a big part of it. And can you blame him? Trump's only mistake was not firing him the day he was inaugurated over this shit. This has been one of the repeated failures of Trump from a libertarian perspective. He hasn't fired anybody, even people he obviously should, and surround himself with creeps like John Bolton and Jeff Sessions, who will make an appearance later. Despite how perniciously the FBI acted, it's hard to feel bad for Trump. Regardless of how justified firing Comey may have been, it was enough for people like Adam Schiff, who despite later confirming he hadn't, promised the American people he had seen classified material that was, quote, not merely circumstantial evidence of conclusion. A smoking gun, if you will. The lying bastard. After the firing of Comey, Schiff and others immediately began crying obstruction, which was the real goal all along. You can see with people like Flynn, who was totally set up for lying to the FBI about an alleged Logan Act violation. The Biden campaign, despite the election not even being certified as we speak, is already talking to foreign administrations. I'm not saying that's wrong. Clearly, what Flynn was doing is totally normal, but they caught him in a lie about it, so he goes to jail. It wasn't even a lie, by the way. They asked him a specific question, a question that they had already asked him. He gave an answer and said, I don't know, go look at what I said last time. Because his answer wasn't the same as it was last time, he lied to the FBI. A total hit job against an American veteran, which is like what these people purport to care about. It's disgusting. This was the goal of the entire special investigation into obstruction, to railroad people. It did a good job, as Flynn just recently got out, and we've seen how the investigation affected Trump's foreign policy. By the way, people like Adam Schiff will never face any consequences or even tough questions from the media for knowingly lying about the contents of classified intelligence briefings, which that is one of the most deeply unforgivable things that's happened in this whole saga, because we trust these intelligence agencies to do horrible things that we, the American public, don't want to hear about on our behalf, and the only way we have to oversee them is through these committees that are supposed to relay to us, the public, what they're up to. And when you have a member of it lying for political purposes, you essentially have these rogue agencies that are free to just attempt to shape the world that they see fit, which is what happened here. The talk of obstruction and firing of Comey was enough for Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to appoint special counsel. This is where Robert Mueller comes in. It's worth mentioning that this is another failure of Trump to select decent people, as Rod Rosenstein wouldn't have even been making that choice if it wasn't for Jeff Sessions stepping down. Trump should have foreseen that Sessions would do something like that. From here, the story is more well known and is basically what you hear about in the press. Despite being nominally about collusion, the special counsel investigation was all about obstruction. You can tell because they attempted to indict 12 GRU operatives, which is the Russian intelligence agency, in an attempt to look tough, like they were very serious and they had evidence of collusion. And they only did that because they thought they would never actually stand trial. When Putin offered for them to come stand trial, the indictments were immediately rescinded, and you never heard about it again. They would not have liked discovery on that case. The primary role Mueller played was to interview a bunch of people and tried to catch them in obstruction traps. His report was widely anticipated as the thing that would sink Trump. The walls were closing in, they would always say. We know from the Mueller report that ultimately nothing untoward was proven. Some people still insist Trump committed obstruction because of this passage in the report. Our investigation found multiple acts by the president that were capable of exerting undue influence over law enforcement investigations. This very carefully worded to imply obstruction without actually saying it. Another dirty trick by the intelligence agency is to give red meat to the press. Who the hell is the Department of Justice anyway to be telling the president what is due and undue influence? Isn't his job as president to influence the executive agency as he sees, the executive branch as he sees fit? There was a brief period of debate about obstruction before the narrative quickly moved on to Ukraine, which is what they ultimately impeached over. Even though no evidence has ever been offered, politicians and the media will still happily repeat the lie. As you can see, though they didn't ultimately charge Trump with anything, the Russiagate narrative still served its purpose: to hobble the president and prevent him from carrying out some of his policy objectives. Policy objectives like withdrawing from Afghanistan. You saw like how the Russiagate narrative plays in when even after all this crap is disproven, the second Trump talks about withdrawing, there's Russian bounties being placed on U.S. soldiers, and it would be an act of treason to give in to Putin and end the longest war in American history that has not accomplished anything besides lining the pockets of people who buy ads with the companies telling you this. So that's the story. Sorry about that, everybody. Even though no evidence has ever been offered, politicians and the media will still happily repeat a failed but still useful coup against the sitting president. So that's the story. In closing, I'd like to explore some of the implications of this story. Namely, I'd like to chastise libertarians that bought into this narrative, like Justin Amash. If a Ron Paul type were to ever somehow gain the presidency, can you imagine what they would do to him? Journalist Michael Tracy summarizes it excellently. Russiagate was an attempt to criminalize presidential deviation from the war party foreign policy consensus. Trump is no libertarian, and this is what they did to him. What do you think they would do to someone that actually wanted to end these wars and abolish the intelligence agencies? And would they get away with it, like they did with Russiagate? Thank you.
Questions?
Brandon?
Are the national security agencies the biggest threat to the American people in the world today?
Other than the Federal Reserve. The thing is, the media is the public mouthpiece of the intelligence agencies. There was a time when they weren't, but like Matt Taibbi talks about this a lot. There was a time where like journalists would regard spooks as someone to be distrusted at best. Now they view them as like rock stars, and the whole name of the game in journalism is to cozy up to these people and benefit off of being their friend.
Can you just define spook?
Intelligence operative, particularly a spy, CIA agent, analyst that gets paid to coordinate with media companies.
So, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court is headed by John Roberts. And John Roberts allowed for the Foreign Intelligence Service Act agent to process those claims. Would he not have information that should have stopped the progress of the FISA warrant.
So you'd think that like he gets his agent from the prosecution, like any case,
Right.
and the prosecution in this case is the intelligence agencies. They intentionally withheld the knowledge that this was opposition research. This actually just came out a few months ago. It's now a known fact that they intentionally withheld the source of the Steele dossier, even though they knew about it when when applying for the warrant.
Now, wasn't there but wasn't there a FISA judge that was in the line that also had problems with withholding information in regards to the FISA warrant?
I don't know about that. Wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, yeah, because FISA is a whole big.
They have rejected, I think, 4 warrants
Right.
in the history of the court. It's a rubber stamp court to spy on American citizens.
And this was so bad that it was one of the 4 that was rejected.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm remembering that now that you say it was
So
originally rejected.
The FISA warrant that was issued in order for this investigation to begin was done so poorly in the beginning that it was rejected.
Yeah,
And that's the government
yeah.
working in our behalf. They get to buy intelligence at the lowest level.
Given the Snowden and NSA scandal stuff that broke 2012, 2013, all that, why do you think more American people are not distrusting of intelligence and the collusion and spying, all the backdoor deals, and all the switching arms and all that?
Because the intelligence idea, if they weren't getting their money's worth and wouldn't coordinate with them. The media's job is to manufacture consent. I think it was Michael Malice just tweeted this today, that like, if you doubt the media's ability to placate the American public, think about the fact that they now have you trained every time you get on an airplane to think about it crashing and just move on like it's normal.
So the media is just exceptionally good at getting people to forget what happened 5 years ago.
Yes.
Trust the same people that did the horrible, awful things and all that.
Yes, and I mean, there's whole academic departments that specialize in training these people to get out and do this work.
Are there any resources or books you recommend for us to learn more about this process?
Which process?
Well, just the nature of propaganda, just the nature
Oh.
of manufacturing.
Antiwar.com is the best resource for all of this stuff.
On that, there was a great podcast that Tom was recently with Michael Crispin Glover. He's a progressive guy, NYU professor who just caught his spell. He's being censored for being a propaganda professor, and he's just talking about how absurd this is. It's just fascinating to hear from the West perspective. And he has a bunch of books that he has a series on that you may want to listen to. I'll give it to you. No, Michael Reckon, he's the other professor that was a Marxist that's now a libertarian.
Next question.
Well, Glenn Greenwald left The Guardian because of censorship. He's still publishing his own stuff on Substack. That's a good voice to all to hear about it.
Brandon?
What is your confidence that Seth Rich was the one who leaked the DNC emails?
Well, so I laid out pretty much the case for it. I think it's very likely. And if it's what happened, he is probably, like him and Edward Snowden and Chelsea Manning are like the 3 most courageous Americans of the last probably 30 years of political history. I like get emotional talking about it.
Didn't Assange tweet like a reward for?
Yeah, and that's how you like Julian Assange, who runs WikiLeaks. I don't know how much he runs it these days.
Yeah, it's hard to do.
But yeah, but he tweeted that he would give, I think it was like a $20,000 reward to whoever could give information about Seth Rich's killer. Totally random. That's about as much as you can confirm without confirming that that's your source. But
I'm sure the FBI interviewed Julian Assange, right?
yeah, no, they did not.
That wouldn't be good.
No, they would not like that.
So,
Trump will pardon him before he gets out?
I would like to think so, but you look at like Trump's record at like not doing things that would cost him nothing and the base would love. It doesn't look good.
He's trying to extradite him.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you talk about Joe Biden? Does he have any influence in this? And why is Hunter Biden's laptop Russian propaganda?
So, and this is where like the seeds, they're not strictly related other than the tactics that the media uses to get you to dismiss it as disinformation were planted during Russiagate. So they do this thing where they just like completely say like this has been debunked, which is what they do about any claim, like they've done about like the internet speeds, the stuff where it's transferred it off of, like they've done about various claims about the Steele dossier and what they knew about it. They just blitz you with these denials. And I think that's the biggest thing, is the legacy of like what the media will do to the American public that they learned they could get away with.
Any last questions?
the consequences of this investigation on this election, the Russia investigation, has caused, I think, tightening of our election procedures. Do you see that as a benefit?
So I don't know how much it's actually tightened our election procedures when you look at like how they did the mail-in votes this year. I mean they've like talked a lot about like preventing like foreign interference, but they literally didn't have to do anything to prevent foreign interference because there was never any in the first place. The foreign interference that they alleged in 2016 was a couple of Facebook ads taken out by some Russian agencies that were seen by like
Of an ad buy, yeah.
yeah, they were
It was terrible.
So
But what I guess, because my perspective comes back from Gore v. Bush, right? And that was one state, Florida. The opposite of that being true, now we have Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and all these other states that are looking actively at their electoral rolls. I think that might be a consequence of that.
So I think, like, the big consequence in this election from the Russiagate is how the entire right side of the country perceives the other half as spending the last 4 years not accepting the result of this election, or that election. So why the hell should they? I think that's the big reason you're seeing these recounts. I think there was a time, even 4 years ago, where even if there was as much evidence as there is right now, the average Republican would have been like, take our lumps, like whatever. But after the last 4 years, no, we will fight this in court, we will fight this in the streets, we will fight this on the like.
Last question.
I have a question. After these elections, kind of like seeing that it has become like a third world banana republic crap show, to go with your own words, and the way that the media have been sitting in the table behind our backs doing all this, do you think it is realistic, a possibility that between now and December 15th somebody's going to pull a kill switch in social media to isolate everybody from what's going on, exactly as it happens in banana republics in third world countries when elections are this contested?
So 2 months ago, I would have said that like there'd be such a backlash that the social media companies would never do it. But you look at what they've done, like we're now like every single one of Trump's tweets is labeled with like, this claim is disputed. Like, all claims are disputed, Twitter. Thank you, Mom. Like, it's, yeah, I think they will. I don't think it's outside their realm of possibility.
Makes me feel good. I don't feel that crazy anymore. That's good. Yeah.
Hey, I would just like to say, I want to echo Josh's thoughts real quick before I give up the mic. The same bastards that are trying to destroy your lives and let your relatives die alone and not let things like this happen are the people who did this for the last 4 years. So like Josh said, whatever you can do.
Give it up.
All right, everybody, thank you for coming out. That was our talk. We have no idea when we'll be back. We'll be back as soon as we can with whatever event we can. In the meantime, please tip your server. They may not be working for a while, and they put up with us, a bunch of crazy people. So, fuck the state.
Fuck the state!
Do whatever you can to live your life, and hopefully we'll see you guys soon. Have a good night.
Everybody,
No.
Yeah, we can stop it. It doesn't really matter at this point for me. It just